"Don't speak, just listen," he rasped. Officer Rachel Tass froze. She had only just stepped from her patrol car when the ragged figure against the brick wall drew her attention. At first glance he looked like the many faces of the city's night, soaked coat, unkempt beard, hair matted from the drizzle. But his eyes held a fierce urgency. At his side a scruffy dog growled, fixed on the shadows of the alley. Rachel's instincts tightened. Her hand hovered near her holster. There was something in his voice, not drunken, not rambling, that made her pause. He didn't flinch when she studied him. He stood steady, alert. "Behind you," he whispered again, low and urgent. She glanced down the alley, wet trash cans, dripping gutters, nothing obvious. Still, the dog's hackles rose. The man pointed, voice shaking. "He's been waiting. Watched you pull up." He followed. Rachel pressed herself against the car, flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the rain. Then, soft, hurried steps, someone moving quick and nervous. The dog barked, sharp and warning. A shadow lunged. Rachel's training put her hand on her weapon, but the man's hoarse voice stopped her. "Don't shoot. He's got a knife." The stranger charged, a blade catching the streetlight. Rachel sidestepped and drew her gun. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. The dog leapt, teeth bared. The attacker swung. Without another thought, the homeless man shoved forward, intercepting the assailant. The two crashed into puddles, struggling. The attacker slashed, the blade passing inches from the man's face, but he held on. Rachel fired a warning shot into the air. The sound cracked through the rain. The attacker flinched long enough for the man to wrench the knife away and toss it. The blade skittered near Rachel's boots. She kicked it clear and moved in, cuffs at the ready. She locked the attacker's arm with one swift motion. The fight was over. Rachel's chest shook with adrenaline as backup lights painted the wet street in blue and red. She turned to the man who had risked everything to stop the violence. He was breathing hard, rain and grime plastered to his face, but his eyes were steady. His dog, obedient and proud, settled at his feet. "You could have been hurt," she said, voice low. "So could you," he answered. No pride, only a plain truth. Rachel offered a blanket from her trunk. He wrapped it around his shoulders without protest. When she reached out to help further, he refused, hospitals, shaking his head as if the very idea made him uneasy. She learned his name slowly, like a truth that needed careful handling. "David," he said finally, almost fragile. Rachel said his name back to herself and committed it to memory. David, the man who had saved her. That night she drove away unsettled and grateful. In the days that followed, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She found herself driving the same routes, checking alleyways, asking at shelters. People knew of the man with the dog, but had no address to give. David was a ghost in plain sight. When she spotted him again, leaning against a crumbling wall, Max curled at his feet. She pulled over. He raised his head, surprised but not alarmed. "Thought you'd forgotten," he said, voice rough. "Not a chance," Rachel replied, and handed him a sandwich and a bottle of water. The exchange was small, ordinary, but something shifted. The simple act of being noticed seemed to matter to him more than anything else. Over the next weeks, Rachel checked on him whenever she could. She brought food, a blanket time. David resisted questions about his past, but fragments surfaced. A steady job once, a small apartment, then a sudden unraveling, an accident, crushing medical bills, the slow loss of everything he'd known. Through it all, Max had stayed by his side. He wasn't the hollow stereotype she'd first assumed. He spoke several languages, could quote a line of poetry or recall a historical detail, and he watched the city with a sharp, weary intelligence. Rachel began to see him as someone with depth, not just a face to be avoided. Their relationship remained cautious and quiet. He accepted help reluctantly. She respected his boundaries but kept showing up. One stormy night she insisted he take refuge in the precinct's spare cot. He resisted, then let Max pull him inside like a reluctant guest to an unfamiliar home. For one night he slept under a roof, warm and dry, and Rachel noticed something like memory returning to him. The small comforts of being seen and sheltered. Months of small kindnesses built a fragile trust. Then, one night everything changed again. Rachel was on a missing child call that led nowhere fast. As hope dimmed, David appeared at her side, Max straining on his leash. "He's in the shed," David said, pointing. Skepticism flickered through the team, but Rachel followed where her trust told her to. They found the terrified boy locked inside, unharmed but shaken. The officers were stunned. David vanished back into the night, before the full weight of what he'd done could sink in. That moment shifted how people looked at him. Rachel spoke to her captain, telling the story plainly. The night David had saved her, the shed, the countless other quiet acts no one noticed. The captain, a skeptic at first, agreed to meet him. In the fluorescent light of the station, with Max faithfully at his side, David looked exposed and uncomfortable. Rachel introduced him not as a vagrant to be pitied, but as a person who had saved lives. Slowly, surprise gave way to consideration. An opportunity opened. Part-time work at the station, helping as a translator for immigrant families. David balked at the idea of charity, but Rachel framed it differently. "It's not charity, it's purpose," she told him. He agreed, hesitantly. His first days were rough. People stared. Whispers trailed him in the hallways. But when David helped a frightened family explain their case, everything changed. His calm, patient way with people cut through fear. His knowledge and empathy became assets the station hadn't expected. Max, once just a companion, turned into the precinct's beloved mascot. As David moved into a rhythm of work and small daily victories, something that had been dormant in him slowly came back. He began to believe in small, stubborn increments that he could exist beyond survival. Rachel watched with a quiet, growing pride. The connection between them, born of gratitude, steadied by companionship, deepened into friendship, then something gentler. Their lives intertwined in unexpected ways. Rachel left notes for him at the spots she knew he frequented, small reminders to meet, or just to let him know someone was thinking of him. David kept those notes like treasures, mementos folded in the pockets of a rough jacket. Sometimes they patrolled the streets together unofficially, her in uniform, him in sturdy boots, Max at his side. They became an odd but comforting sight to neighbors who had learned to trust them. Trouble didn't vanish. One night a gang cornered David, jeering at his clothes and threatening to take Max. Rachel arrived with backup and drove them off. She patched his bruises in the squad car's glow and refused his protests. "You saved me once. It's my turn," she told him. Gradually, David accepted the idea that he might have a future. He spoke at a community meeting, nervous at first, then honest and compelling. He told a story of being unseen, of survival, and then of hope, how one act of kindness reminded him he still mattered. The room was silent. Parents came up to thank him, children petted Max, and the precinct decided to make his role more permanent. He had become, unexpectedly, indispensable. Life edged forward. David found a modest apartment, bare walls, a simple bed, but a roof that smelled like possibility. Max had his corner and toys Rachel picked out. The ordinary routines of domestic life were unfamiliar and strangely beautiful to him. He started saving small amounts, rebuilding a sense of self piece by piece. Rachel and David moved carefully towards something deeper. There were moments of doubt and retreat on both sides, times when the scars of the past called him back to the streets. Rachel worried, but she never walked away. Her presence steadied him in ways he hadn't expected. When he finally brought flowers to her apartment, awkward, earnest, bought with his first paycheck, the tenderness between them felt like a quiet miracle. Public recognition followed their private progress. Papers called David an unlikely hero after the missing child rescue. Cameras and praise were strange to him, and sometimes he flinched under the attention. But at official ceremonies and neighborhood gatherings, he refused to take the spotlight, using it instead to speak for those still overlooked. "Don't look at me," he told the crowd once. "Look at those you ignore every day." The applause that followed was sincere. In time, David's life steadied. He worked, he volunteered, and he found a reliable place in a community that had once turned away. Rachel's captain told her, with a candid smile, that she'd changed since David came into her life. For the better. She fought harder, cared more deeply, and reminded everyone why they wore the badge. Their story, born from a violent moment in a rain-slicked alley, had become something bigger, a reminder that people carry hidden strength, and that small acts of recognition can alter a life. One evening, as they walked beneath the city lights, Rachel slipped her hand into David's. He stiffened, then relaxed, letting the warmth in. "Do you ever think about tomorrow?" she asked softly. "I do now," he replied, and for the first time in years the word tomorrow felt like an invitation instead of a threat. Months later, as they placed the last box in David's new apartment, he paused and said the thing that had once seemed impossible. "You saved me." Rachel shook her head, smiling. "You saved yourself. I only reminded you who you were." He pulled her close, grateful and humbled. From the shadows of the city to a modest flat and a routine of work and belonging, David's journey had come full circle. Max slept at their feet, steady as ever. They had both been changed by that rainy night. Not by spectacle, but by the human truth that courage and compassion can appear in the most unexpected places. In a city that hurries past faces and stories, a cop and a once homeless man found one another, and with time and care they built something like a home.